transact with you, for me to even accept and honor your sacrifices, you don't give anywhere you see. It is the place I have chosen. And many Christians give everywhere, but they have nothing to show for it. Are you listening to me? Is water good? Talk to me. Is water good?
Yes.
Are rivers good?
Yes.
If you plant your food in the river, you plant your maize in the river, what happens? How much will you harvest from the river? Nothing. What about if you put a fish in the river? What happens? Everything, every seed has its own God-ordained place. So, every one of us, you must know the place ordained by God for you. I don't give anywhere and everywhere. And I don't give where there is need. I give at the right altar for me. Some of you think your tithes and offerings, you can go and help your late uncle's children. You are lying. You are deceiving yourself. God is saying, if I'm going to transact with you and honor your sacrifices, it is not every place you see. It's not every preacher at the corner of the street with a box guitar. Are you the one chosen by God for me? So God says, it's not in every place you see, but in that place where the Lord shall choose for you in the land, among thy tribes. That means in the land. There you shall offer thy burnt offerings, and there you shall do all that I command thee. Tell a neighbor, not every altar will speak for you. It's the place God has chosen for you. Now, history of altars. The history of altars. When you talk about the history of altars, because they are really spoken about very much in the Old Testament, people have this misconception that altars belong to the Old Testament. People have that conception. Altars don't belong to the Old Testament. Why? Let me show you. When did the Old Testament begin? In Genesis. That's one opinion. When? In the beginning. Another opinion. When? Starting with Moses. Another opinion. When? Cain and Abel. Okay. When? When time began. Fine. So which answer do we settle for? The time of Job. Let me show you. The Old Testament begins with Moses. Abraham did not live in the Old Testament. What is a testament? A testament is a pact or a contract. Abraham did not live in the Old Testament. The Old Testament was brought into the picture by God and Moses. Exodus 24, verse 6. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in the basins, and half of the blood is sprinkled on the altar. Verse 8. And Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, 1, 2, go. Behold, the blood of the covenant, which the Lord has made between concerning all his words. When did the covenant begin? Who began the old covenant? And he ratified it with what? Blood. Let me show you something else. Turn to the book of Hebrews, chapter 9, verse 18. Whereupon, neither the first testament was dedicated without. Even the Old Testament was dedicated with what? Who dedicated the Old Testament with blood? Who is older, Moses or Abraham? So did Abraham have a testament? Who held the Old Testament? From Moses. But before Moses sealed the Old Testament with blood, were there altars before then? Yes. Did Abraham have them? Yes. So are altars a product of the Old Testament? No. Therefore, the elimination of the Old Testament cannot eliminate altars, because altars were not brought by the old. A man who did not employ, you have no power to fire. And therefore, because it's not Moses who brought altars, the elimination or the nullification of the Old Testament cannot nullify their existence. Do you get it? Yes. Let's read on verse 19. For when, look at that again. 1, 2, go. For when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and of goats with water and scarlet wool, and hyssop, and sprinkled both the book and the book is the will that contained the testament, and it's Moses who brought it. Now, just like many people think, let me ask you this other question. When did the New Testament begin? Where in the Bible does the New Testament begin? Come on. Let me hear opinions. Is it wrong to have an opinion? When does the New Testament begin? Let me hear. 1, 2, one person. After the death and resurrection of Jesus. Is that where the New Testament begins? Matthew. Where does the New Testament begin in the Bible? The birth of Jesus Christ. At the cross. Now, the Bible has 2 sections. Old Testament and New Testament. The Old Testament contains events that happened outside the Old Testament itself. For the Old Testament was brought in by Moses. But there was life before Moses. Do you understand? And the New Testament section of the Bible begins with Matthew. Isn't it? But the truth of the matter is, there are Old Testament events found in the New Testament section of the Bible. The New Testament began the morning Jesus rose up. Have we not had communion here? And on the night that he was betrayed, he took the cup and said, "This cup is the New Testament in my blood." Now, what were you partaking? Let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 25. This, and after the same manner, that's what I just recited. Let us read. 1, 2, go. And after the same manner also, he took the cup when he had supped, that is after supper, saying, 1, 2, go. This cup, wait. So before he had taken the cup, there was no New Testament. So Jesus ministered in the Old. Okay, read. For this cup is the New Testament in my blood. So the New Testament is in whose blood? Before he had shed his blood, what testament was at work? So the New Testament does not begin with Matthew chapter 1 verse 1. New Testament begins in John, I think, chapter 20, when he rises from the dead. Because the testament is sealed with blood. So until his blood was shed, there was no New Testament. So Jesus lived in the Old Testament. Jesus preached in the Old Testament. Jesus died in the Old Testament. But he rose in the New. Do you understand? So when he rose up that morning at the graveside, those of you that will go to the tomb and will see the garden tomb. Mary Magdalene thinks that Jesus' body has been stolen, and she sees a man behind in the olive trees and says, Master, where did you put the body of my Lord? Then Jesus said, Mary. And she comes and, oh, my Rabboni, my teacher. And he says, don't touch me yet. For I have not yet ascended to my Father and your Father. Why did he say, don't touch me? Because Jesus was yet to become the high priest of humanity. And every high priest presides over an altar and must of necessity have something to offer. So when the high priest of the Old Testament went into the Holy of Holies, he had to carry blood. And when he was going in there, nobody was supposed to touch him. For they believed in the transfer of sin by touching. They also believed in the transfer of healing and blessing by touching. So that is why the woman with the issue of blood said, if I can only touch the hem of his garment, the blessing of healing will be transferred through touching. So if you touch the high priest when he is yet to enter the Holy of Holies, you have transferred the sin upon him, and God will reject his offering. And when God rejects his offering, in the Holy of Holies, number one, God will kill him. And that means for the rest of the year, the country is not blessed. So Jesus tells her, don't touch me yet, because I'm yet to appear in the heavenly Holy of Holies at the heavenly altar and present my blood. And when he appeared there and presented his blood was accepted. Now he came back and he ate with them and said, Thomas, why did I doubt? Why did you doubt? Come and touch me now. See, the nails went through here. Touch here and see. Do you understand? So the New Testament begins with the resurrection morning. And when you talk about altars, people have this misconception that you are taking us to the Old Testament. No. Long before the Old Testament came, they were there. They were there. So, let me show you the first altar as we understand what altars do. Genesis 8, verse 20. And we cross over to chapter 9, verse 3. This is the first altar recorded. And I will finish with this. Let us read. 1, 2, go. And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord. And he took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl and offered burnt offerings on them. Why did he take clean animals? Because by revelation he had discovered when Cain offered an offering that he decided himself, God rejected. You see, God is not desperate for your offerings. Let me announce it to you. Jehovah is not desperate for your offerings. He is a very picky and choosy God. He chooses what to accept and what to reject. But the beauty of the matter is, he has revealed to us through his word the kind of an offering he will accept and the kind he will reject. So even as you come to offer, you ought already to be knowing within yourself whether yours will be accepted or rejected. For instance, if he says, bring unto me the whole tithe, don't bring 9%, he will reject. Some people are comfortable giving their tithe when their salary is 10,000. After all, 1,000, itafanya nini? But when you begin earning 400,000 and you remember the tithe is 40, hey, can you do 40,000 with something? Can you do something big with 40,000? What about with 1,000? Many people don't have a problem tithing when their income is small. But when the tithe is in tens of thousands, that's when they begin to rationalize, and instead of the 40, they decide within themselves, if I give 20, God should understand. Listen, you didn't give him the tithe So what you have given cannot be accepted by him. It may be accepted by the church, but not by him. And it will not bring any blessings to you. Because he said, bring the whole 10%, not a 5% or a 9%. I've got to tell you the truth. Then in Corinthians chapter 16, 1 Corinthians chapter 16 verse 2, he says, on the first day of the week, Sunday, let every man bring an offering in keeping with his own prosperity. If God has prospered you, you know and he knows. And if the prosperity level at which God has put you is a level where you can give him 1,000 every service, and you are eating the 1,000 and bringing 100, you are cheating yourself. What you brought is not in keeping with your level of prosperity. Jehovah will not accept. If you don't believe me, go ask Cain. How can you spend hundreds of thousands on yourself, but on Sunday morning, you are bringing 100 shillings, 250 bob? Who are you lying to? You are already stirring up God's jealousy and anger against you. Why? You spend more on yourself than on him. That means you value yourself more than him. You have become an idol to yourself and replaced him. He's a jealous God. Anything you give priority more to than him becomes your idol. And you can know the idols in a person's life by looking at the budget and their expenditure. Oh yeah. Don't tell me, Pastor, idols belong to the Asians, those carved things with the 10 fingers. Your budget is a clear indicator of what your idol is. Your budget is a clear indicator what your idol is and where your heart is. Your giving to God is the only other thing that shows to him what you love, either him or yourself and your things. What a man loves most, he puts his money in it. If that foolish man lies to you that he loves you and he never puts anything in you, just know he's taking you for a ride. Whatever a man loves, he puts his money into. Your budget is a clear